13 years I've waited for this chance. I won't be dying today.
Come to me, Ifrit!
Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to episode 248 of the Reformed Gamers, the show all about gaming and going against the chains of fate. I'm one of your hosts, Logan.
And I am the second icon of fire, Micah.
It's so dope. Dude, so people, listeners, y'all have known if you've listened to the last couple episodes, I'm not super hot on Final Fantasy 16. I almost called it 15. It's like, whoa, we're not talking about the boy band game. Thank goodness this game is significantly better than that one. But I'm excited to talk about this game. There's some things in here, man, as I was kind of thinking through, writing up these show notes. Like, this game's got some pretty interesting themes for us to cover. We've got a good handful of write-ins here from our patrons as well, which is always you can write in to the show over on patreon.com. I'm pretty stoked to get into this, man.
Yeah, we got a good episode today. Always love the big sort of dive-ins, the spoiler cast for these tentpole games. And, even though, you're not as hot on Final Fantasy 16 as, say, Tears of the Kingdom, for example, then it's still worth diving into. We've got a lot to chop up. Again, the patrons had some interesting thoughts here. So, I'm excited to dive into this one.
Yeah, man. It is going to be a good time. As always, if you are brand new to the show and you're like, wait a minute, how much of this can I listen to? What's the spoiler stuff? First of all, if you're watching on YouTube, or even if you listen to this on your podcast catcher, there's timestamps, as always with the show. And there will be a timestamp in there that says when the spoilers are happening. And at that point, that's when you stop listening, go play the game, come back and listen to the rest of it. But until then, you're safe. You're cool right now. You're cool, calm, and collected. You don't got to worry about that. Some things that I do need to get into before we get into what we're playing, as we always do. Just the usual housekeeping and stuff like that. There is a new episode of Talk TRG that is up over on Patreon for $5 and up Patreon supporters. Me and Nate revived our Snap Chatter podcast for one episode, and we sat down and talked about kind of the new ongoing meta in Marvel Snap, some of the new cards, their recent changes to the Spotlight cash system, monetization, and all that stuff. So if you are interested in that, that is over on Patreon for you there. And then we also have a lot of stuff going up on YouTube, mainly because I'm still streaming Trails of Cold Steel. We finished Cold Steel 2, working on the review currently. By the time this episode comes out, I hope to have that up on YouTube, so you can go check that out for yourself. But in the meantime, I am streaming Trails of Cold Steel 3, and man, Micah, I tell you, man, this game has some of the, like, when you think of anime, right, you think of just some mildly inappropriate stuff where the characters are being a little suggestive with the things they're saying.
I'm with you.
And this game has it all over the place. I just got a stream deck for streaming, and I have a bonk button that I have been using very liberally because the characters, I mean, I get it. They're in school, hormones, they're interested in things, but it's like, y'all need to settle down. I'm going to have to start spraying y'all with water bottles and stuff. Like, it's crazy.
Okay.
Actually, no, I shouldn't do that because they would probably enjoy that. Anyway,
well, how many hours into Cold Steel 3 are you so far?
see, here's the thing. I didn't think it was that much. I'm like, this is probably like, what, 3 hours in? No, at the time clock, it's close to 10. And I'm like, holy crap. Okay, we're way in the weeds now.
Yeah, well into it. Okay,
but
cool.
Other than that, it's a good time. They changed the graphics of it. The game looks great. And I'm like, you know what? This ain't bad. Apart from having to deal with kids at this military academy, it's not bad.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
Good deal.
It's kind of like being a teacher. It's great, but the kids kind of get annoying from time to time. So it's just living my life out in game form.
There you go.
One of the other things that we're doing is we're playing games, right? I'm playing Cold Steel 3, but we're playing a lot of other games. And I'm excited to get into some of these games here. So Micah, kick us off, man, with some TRG Kids.
Yes, as listeners know from last episode, man, I had some major beef with Minecraft and how it was always crashing, and we couldn't seem to find a console where it would perform well, and I deleted it off the PlayStation to the chagrin of my oldest daughter. And I was like, well, maybe it was a recent patch, maybe it was this, maybe it was that. So we reinstalled it, checked it out. So far so good. She's been playing some, not pushing the envelope. They're not doing split screen, which sometimes causes some bugs. But right now she's enjoying the Minecraft, so that's kind of back in action. And then, of course, just sort of the mainstays that we've been hitting: Kingdom Hearts 2 with my middle daughter,
Hmm.
and Tears of the Kingdom for my son, especially. He just got, well, I almost said a spoilery thing.
Uh-oh.
He did a major boss involving lightning. I'll say that. And that was
What
fun to watch him do that.
what did he think? Did he just love it?
Oh, he loves it. I think he's probably seen some of this stuff from either my
Okay.
playthrough or his sister's
Mhm.
playthroughs. But he has he's about 60-75% of the way through the main quest. So yeah, he's
Awesome.
getting on through it. So that's really cool to see.
Yeah.
Of course, we've sung high praises for Tears of the Kingdom, so I won't
Oh, yeah.
beat that drum anymore. So
Even
that's
did a whole
TRG
episode
Kids.
on it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just another spoiler episode, a very good one at that. But yeah, moving on to what I've been playing. It hasn't been long since we last recorded, Logan, so I haven't got a whole lot under the
Yeah.
belt. But I'm since beating Final Fantasy XVI, I've been much more in a small game zone. Like, let me knock out some of these $10 to
Yeah.
$20 titles, and
Yeah.
looking at some things for the PSVR always. I'm looking for titles for that,
Yeah.
and I came across this one that kind of rose to the top as far as like landing on like top 10 best games for PSVR 2 kind of thing. Was this game
Mhm.
called Walkabout Mini Golf, which is like, okay, well, it's mini golf. How good can it be? And that's sort of true, but man, it's just a really solid game with really fun designed mini golf courses. I love putt
Okay.
just in general in
Yeah.
real life and in video game form, but this game has a lot of fun, just neat designed courses. And the whole idea, it's called Walkabout Mini Golf, is you can walk around in the VR space, and there's like little like lost golf balls you can find with like different colors and designs, and then you can use them
Okay.
later on in your courses.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, just a fun VR game called Walkabout Mini Golf. I recommend this one. It's for every VR headset, I'm almost positive.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, I've been playing that one. It's got a lot of well-priced DLC if you want to kind of add to it. But yeah, the second thing I've been playing is this week. PlayStation came out and said, "Hey, Sea of Stars, the upcoming uh, Japanese-inspired role-playing game from Sabotage, the small indie developer that created The Messenger." Their new game, Sea of Stars, is coming to PlayStation Plus on day one, and also it's been announced it's coming to Game Pass on day one.
Yeah.
And they dropped a demo on the PlayStation Store, so I downloaded that demo and started digging into that, and really was enjoying what I saw. I got into several battle encounters and was kind of getting a feel for the mechanics. And
Mhm.
then my power went out randomly, and I was right in the middle of the demo. I was feeling it. I was about maybe 15, 20 minutes in, and lost power for a little bit, and kind of that killed sort of the momentum I had playing the game.
Yeah.
So I haven't
That'll
gone
do
back to
that.
it. That was like yesterday, I
Yeah.
think that happened. So I haven't gone back to it yet. But Logan, I know you've been playing the Sea of Stars
Yeah.
demo too, and I think maybe you've completed it. So what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on it?
Yeah. I finished it, and it's funny, man. I didn't connect the dots there that this was the team that did The Messenger, which is a uh, gorgeous looking game, really just visually
Yeah.
striking. I wasn't very good at The Messenger, but I did like what I saw and heard. And man, this game, I was already excited for this game, but golly, it's gorgeous. The combat is really really good. I like it a lot. And some of the, I mean, obviously it's a little slice, so you're kind of like dropped into the story a little bit. I did like the little touches where like you're talking to a character, and they'll start talking like mid sentence. It'll say redacted for spoiler reasons. I'm like,
Yeah.
thank you, that's
I
awesome.
saw that. Very cool too. And I saw there was a part where I tried to walk through the town and some guards were guarding the
Yeah,
exit. And it's
yeah,
like, you can access this and after the demo or something like that. I can't
yeah,
remember
yeah,
what it
yeah.
said.
I just, man, so that right there tells me this game's gonna have some humor to it. It's gonna have some charm to it,
Yeah.
and that immediately sucks me in. But yeah, really good game. The puzzles are really fascinating. I like the just some of the different tools that it's got going. The fishing mini game specifically. Did you get to mess with this one?
Yes, I did. And that
Okay.
was actually what I was doing when the power went out.
Okay.
So I was doing it for a while because I was trying to get one of those big fish toward the
Yeah.
like back of the pond. It was really hard kind of getting the mechanic and realizing I didn't have to pull the line hard. I could like let the slack out sometimes
Yeah.
and then kind of bring him back in. I liked that mechanic, I think,
Okay.
but it took me a little while. I still don't know if I
Yeah.
got fully used to it yet, but yeah, I like
Okay.
what they were cooking up there. Yeah.
I'm of the same mind. I liked what they had going, but after I finished the demo, I was like, I'm not really sure I quite understood completely how the fishing works. But that's okay. So I'm going to spend a lot of time doing it in the game. I don't know what it is, if it's like my old age or something, but I'm like getting really into the fishing mini games in these JRPGs. I've been doing it in the Trails games for a little while
Yeah.
now, and I'm like, golly, dude. There's something about just hanging out and chilling. You know, Adam, we'd make fun of Adam on the show because he would play some like fishing games from time to time.
Oh,
And I
yeah,
was
that's
like,
right. I
you
forgot
know,
about that.
but now I'm like, man, he was on to something. He was ahead of the curve here. There's nothing more relaxing than just fishing
Mhm.
in a game. You know,
Trendsetter, Adam.
just that's what he is, man. He's a trendsetter. But yeah, I really enjoyed the demo, and I mean, I was already looking forward to the main game already, but I
Mhm.
liked it already. For those who care, Mike, I'm curious if you picked because you could pick between two different characters starting out. You could pick between. I bet her name's Valerie, but I called her Valir. And then you could do Zale, who is the male
Mhm.
character with the like sun powers. And but I picked. I'm going to call her Valerie because that's probably how you actually pronounce her name with the staff. Who did you pick?
Yeah, no, I was really torn, but diamonds are forever, so I picked Zale.
There you go, man.
And yeah, no, it wasn't that big a deal. I just like I liked his little weapon. What?
Sorry, I just got the Zale joke. Oh man,
Yeah, no, I liked his weapon he had going on, so I picked
yeah,
him. And it didn't really matter. It said it didn't matter as far as story wise
yeah,
goes, or something
yeah.
like that. So I was like, okay, just whatever. It'll be for combat probably. And it seems
Hmm.
like they were both in the party anyway, kind
Yeah,
of, sort of.
yeah,
So
hmm
I don't know how much difference that'll be,
yeah.
but yeah, I picked Zale.
Yeah,
Mhm.
man. It was a good time. Good time. Very
Right.
much looking forward to the Sea of Stars demo. So, dear listeners, check it out for yourself. It's going to be on PlayStation. Going to have
Mhm.
you on the Xbox Game Pass as well. And I believe there's a demo on the Switch as well. So, I mean, you can just play it on just about anything, it seems like.
Yeah.
So, you can check that out for yourselves and let us know what you think. But that's going to transition over to what I've been playing. I've been playing Trails, on the stream. And when I'm not streaming, I was kind of dabbling with some other games after we finished Final Fantasy 16. I was looking at the PlayStation Store and I was like, man, what do I want to play? What do I want to play? The summer sale's going on. Oh, Wild Hearts is on sale, and I
Mm.
was wanting to play that. I picked it up in the draft that we did for the Fantasy Critic League,
Yeah.
and I was like, man, I'm real curious. I love me some Monster Hunter. Let me see what they've got. And I gotta say, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's not quite what I'm used to when it comes to Monster Hunter. There's some differentiating things there. I like that there's a lock on ability because you don't have that in Monster Hunter. This is real nice
Okay.
to be able to lock on the monster. But man, oh man, I'm blanking on the name of the tools that you get. The big thing in this game is using tools, these wooden like dragon tools that you can use to help you with your hunt. You can put up like bulwarks, so if something's charging at you, you can put up a giant wall to knock it out. You can build like a giant a spring-loaded hammer to knock things off their perches. You can put like little springs on there so you can get higher up in the areas. Really cool stuff that when you incorporate it in the combat, just works real great when you have a lot of fun with it. I like and it's just I don't know. There's some cool things about it. I like the story being more straightforward and not. At least for me, when I play Monster Hunter, I skip past the story. This one, I'm a little more interested. I'm like, okay, there's some intrigue here. What's kind of going on with these worlds? What's going on with these monsters? I want to know. And I gotta say, any game that lets me give my main character a big old afro is going to be a good game to me. So I'm enjoying it. I've messed around with a few different weapons. I'm messing around with the giant sword, messing around with the regular kind of katana thing. I think I much prefer the katana. It's a little more agile. And yeah, it's a good time. The co-op sort of online play works really great too. You start a hunt and then you hold down on the D-pad, it sends a beacon out, people join your party, and you can hunt monsters together. It's a really cool time. I will say this though, this game does have one thing that Monster Hunter has that I don't like, and it's the giant gorilla monsters, dude. They're very agile, they're aggressive, they're scary, they're terrifying. I don't know what it is about these games and giant gorillas, but they design them in a very scary way. But yeah, Wild Hearts is surprisingly good. I think what it got like on Open Critic was like around the 80s or something. I think that's pretty accurate. It's not something that like you got to
Uh,
definitely go out and play, but it's pretty cool.
Logan, I was looking at the developer, and this
Hmm.
is just according to Wikipedia. It's developed by Omega Force. Is that
Hmm.
accurate by what you understand?
Hmm. Yep, same people that did
They
what was it, Samurai Warriors?
Well, they have done like so many of the Warriors, like Dynasty Warriors type games for
That's
Koei
right.
Tecmo, and like they have credits on here from like Hyrule Warriors and Fire
Yes,
Emblem Warriors,
that's
Three
it. Yeah.
Hopes,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
things like that. So that's I don't think they were the primary developer on those games, but maybe I'm wrong. But either way, I didn't realize it was that developer, so that's interesting to
Yeah.
me.
And it's kind of funny because it kind of makes sense. You can kind of see that in how your character moves and how they attack, at least with the katana. And so you kind of see a little bit of that flavor in there. But
Yeah.
yeah, Wild Hearts, man, is a cool game. I like dipping into it every now and then.
And this is the other weird thing is this is an EA Originals
Yeah. Yeah.
title, which is kind of that whole, It Takes Two,
Hmm. The soon
kind
to be
of
Immortals of Avium.
right, yeah, that whole kind of publishing line. So kind of interesting there that they're
Yeah, man.
branching out. But yeah,
That's
okay.
that's something I like to see about the EA. I mean, I loved It Takes Two. I mean, my wife loved that game. Great game.
Hmm.
It's nice kind of seeing these games that EA is doing that is outside their wheelhouse, and they're really not bad. So it kind of gets me even more excited for Immortals of Avium and seeing what they're going to be
Yeah.
doing with that. But yeah,
It
uh,
seems like real quick. Last thing,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt, Logan,
No,
but
you're
it
fine.
seems like they're certainly trying to capture that Monster Hunter vibe, and I don't know if they completely successfully did that. I
Yeah,
wonder if it's just that's just Monster Hunter's thing, and they're really going to have a
yeah,
stranglehold on that. And
yeah,
when the inevitable Monster Hunter World 2 comes out, if
yeah,
it will kind of like reestablish that and sort of solidify like, no, we're the kings of this genre,
yeah, yeah.
or if we'll see a fizzle kind of from Monster Hunter World 1 to 2.
Hmm.
I wonder. But anyway, just
Yeah,
kind of a
we'll
random
see.
thought.
Yeah, but what they got there is a great start. So I mean, I would love to see a Wild Hearts 2 and they take what they got and improve
Yeah.
on it because that would be real fascinating. I'm interested. I always try to check out these kind of off the wall, not off the wall, but these kind of like off the beaten path ones. Like there was one that was on the Vita that was kind of popular. That was a Taukiden Kiwami, I think it was called, and
Okay.
that was a really good one. And both this and Wild Hearts have a lock on button. Just saying, Capcom, you need to put a lock on button when you're fighting the monsters.
There we go.
Just saying that would make the game 10 times better. But the other game I've been playing is this one that I've been there's been buzz building about this game surrounding it, and it just kind of keeps getting steadily greater and greater. And so I dipped into that Remnant 2 game mainly
Hmm.
because years ago a lot of people were recommending the first game to me and saying, "Dude, Logan, you love Dark Souls. This is Dark Souls with guns. You would love it." I'm like, I don't know. I never played it. But then this one came out in early release, and the buzz was building around. I'm like, this looks pretty good. Let me dive into it. And I gotta say, Remnant 2 is Dark Souls with guns, and I kind of like it, man. It's real good. And I think what it has impressed me the most is, and I tweeted this out a little bit earlier. There's this boss that you come across that it's not one sole entity. It's a series of blocks that are moving and shooting things at you, and you're in this labyrinth, and they're rotating, and so you kind of have to do certain things to avoid them crushing you and move around at certain times. I was like, I have never really played a boss quite like this. This is really fascinating. The music is really good. The controls are tight and fluid in the ways that they need to be. And man, I gotta say, Remnant 2, quite the surprise hit, quite the surprise game for me. I'm really enjoying it. For those who care, I picked the handler class because I wanted the dog companion, and boy, is he super helpful. He's a good old boy.
How much does this game emphasize multiplayer compared to other traditional Souls games?
It seems like a lot, and I think from what I'm gathering, it seems like you can play this game. You can play a lot more of this game co-op versus something like Dark Souls, where you can only summon people like outside boss rooms and things like that. So
Hmm.
it's definitely, I can see where it's definitely meant to be a co-op game, but you can still play it solo too. Either way.
Yeah, well, I'm just sitting here watching a trailer because I am familiar with it, but I haven't seen a ton on it. And the emphasis I'm seeing does seem like you're kind of with someone a good bit of the
Hmm.
time. But yeah, maybe that's just from this one
Hmm.
brief look at it. But yeah, the trailer looks good. I
Hmm.
like the art direction and the graphics. They look good. It looks like smooth action.
Hmm.
What are you playing it on?
PS5.
Okay, is it a smooth 60? How's the experience there as far as
It's
the performance?
buttery smooth. The only graphical issues I've had is something with like shaders when the lighting changes, or if I'm like in my menu rotating my character around, checking things out, checking out my gear and all that. Because I dabble in fashion souls a little bit when I play Dark Souls, and so you'll see the shading be a little wonky at times. But other than that, it's been running buttery smooth, and I haven't had really any issues with it at all. But yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of one of those. To me, this is the this feels that double A game,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
void of yesteryear that we always opine.
Yeah.
Like a really quality game. Really, I think it's better than what I'm giving it credit for by calling it double A. It's a really well reviewed game.
Yeah.
But yeah, this looks wonderful. I'm looking at this trailer. And yeah, this looks fantastic. Yeah, good stuff.
It's a lot of fun. It's funny though. People were describing this as like Dark Souls with guns, but man, I was getting some Returnal vibes with some of the locations. And
Sure.
I think one of the items I got, it said like biome portal, and I'm like, there's that B word again that we heard for like 6 months
Yeah.
straight. So, but yeah, I mean, if any of y'all are interested in that, definitely give it a shot. Take a look at it. See what you think, and don't let the comparison to Dark Souls scare you away. It's not that hard. It's not that hard.
Cool.
Then again, I got the Ultimate Edition, so I got all the extra stuff. So maybe that's made it significantly easier for me. But yeah, it's not hard. You're fine. Just
cool.
Dip, duck, dive, and dodge, and you'll be all right. But yeah, other than that, that's what we've been playing. But we've also been playing some Final Fantasy XVI. So let's get into the topic itself. Now, again, there's a timestamp that's going to let you know when we're getting to the spoiler zones. I will also announce that. But before we get into the game, let's talk about the game just a little bit here. And we've got some write-ins here that we're going to get into as well. But Micah, we've talked about Final Fantasy XVI a lot on the show. But let's just kind of, we finally finished the game. Let's kind of give just a spoiler-free review of the game.
Yeah, so spoiler-free review for me is this is it's not your mama's and your papa's Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
This is a new. Although really, we've been dipping our toe. We, as in the Final Fantasy genre, franchise, has been dipping our toe into the action genre for a while now. When you take, I guess, 15 and Final Fantasy VII Remake, as far as kind of the big releases.
Yeah.
But with that said, I think, and we'll get into it with I think Alex's right in. I think it captures the essence of Final Fantasy while also bringing in a new style of action game into the franchise.
Yeah.
And so, to me, this is a game that lives, breathes, and dies off of its boss fights and these larger than life moments in these encounters that are just highly memorable. And it really it builds out a wonderful world that is what I would call classic Final Fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I've not played a lot of the sort of that source material from the sprite based days of Final Fantasy, I think it throws back to those kind of games as far as the world itself.
Yeah.
And so, I think a lot of this game will depend on how much you like the action combat, because there is a lot of it. That is the meat and potatoes of the enjoyment of the gameplay, is the combat. And so if you don't jive with that, then you might not like this game so much. Yeah. But if you really do like the combat, they're going to give you a lot of it. And they're going to give you different kind of permutations of it, and there's a lot of layers there. So I really clicked with a lot of that, and to me, this is like a 9 out of 10 kind of game. This is a really special game that is worthy of the Final Fantasy name, and is going to go down as one of I think PS5's best games. And yeah, so it's a really high mark that Square wanted to hit and did hit, as far as like production and cinematics and graphical presentation and all of that. I think they really knocked it out of the park with all that stuff. There's some pitfalls that I think, if you've heard me and Logan talk about, that are it can be pretty detrimental. We've talked about the side quests. We'll get into some of that. We've talked about just these lull, boring moments. We talked about several facets that I won't necessarily regurgitate right now, but those to me are small dings on an overall great game. And Logan, I know you don't feel exactly like me, so let me kind of go ahead and kick it over to you now.
Yeah, man, talking about this game has been difficult for me, because I have a tendency to, like, when I don't like a game, and I've noticed this in the past year, I tend to be a little too harsh on it. God of War Ragnarok was a prime example of that. And so when I was looking at this game, I'm like, okay, let me just kind of pull back a little bit and try to look at the good, combine it with the bad, and just try to be fair to it. Don't be mean to it. Don't be harsh. Just try to be fair, And I've tried to do that. And when I finished it, I was like, you know what? I feel like this game is a good 3.5 to a 4 for me. It felt like I was playing Crisis Core, that remake that came out last year, where like there's some awesome stuff in it, but I just wasn't feeling it. And so you're right, man. You hit it on the head, hit the nail on the head with the highlights of this game is those big, grandiose icon battles, which are truly like if you play through this game, that is easily probably the thing that you will remember the most because it is so stinking epic. It's so cool. And it's accompanied by some of the best freaking music in the series.
Yes.
When I see people talking about this game, I'm like, why is no one talking about the music? It is so dang good. Like, and that's what Final Fantasy is usually known for is their music. And it's no different here. Some of the best music in the game, just really just grand kind of epic orchestral stuff with the chorus of people. And it feels truly epic at times and it fits in with the series. And I kind of want to get into this here because I'm going to talk a little bit about how I believe this game is still a Final Fantasy game. Even though that's been a hot topic, like people are saying this isn't a Final Fantasy game or whatever.
Right.
And I disagree with that. And I want to get into Alex's write-in who's going to cater us or take us into that. So he writes in, as always, you can over on patreon.com. He says, hey guys, I will preface my question by reminding you that I don't have a PS5 and have not played this game, but have been tuned into the discussion surrounding the game. I've heard you and others affirm the notion that Final Fantasy XVI is not really an RPG, but more of an action game. And I've heard you defend that this game is definitely a Final Fantasy game. Can I ask you to qualify that statement? Did this feel like a mainline Final Fantasy game to you both? Surely Final Fantasy Origins Stranger of Paradise or Final Fantasy Type 0 or Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion are also Final Fantasy games, but do not get the title of mainline games or Final Fantasy 16. What makes this worthy of that 16 for you? And man, I got to say, from the moment you start this game, it has hints, nods, and homages and undertones from those classic Final Fantasy games. The Pixel remasters came out recently, and I played through the first game. I tried to do the second game, but found the mechanics a little too wonky for my liking, so I didn't stick with it. But I've played 4, I've played 6, I've played those classic games, and all of those have one common occurring theme: the crystals. The crystals that grant magic abilities to certain characters or to the land itself that are responsible for kind of maintaining order or balance within the ecosystem and the environments or the world as a whole. And that is a huge integral part of this game. I'm not going to go any further beyond that, but that's a main thing in here. In a lot of ways, I was kind of wondering at times, like, is this a precursor to the first Final Fantasy game? Which we know Strangers of Paradise actually is that. But still, I was like, man, I feel like this is going to lead into one of the classic games or follow up after them or something to that degree. You have the whole themes of kingdoms and kings and, your armies and all that stuff. And I'm like, dude, this is taking me back to those old classic games. This feels like a classic Final Fantasy game, but brought into the modern age that looks freaking incredible, has really great music, but the combat is way different, So to me, this felt like a classic Final Fantasy game, but brought into the modern age, and they changed the combat. So for me, that's why I think it's a Final Fantasy game, because it has a lot of the key staples of the classic Final Fantasy games. And let's not forget, it's got chocobos. Not that that's like a main thing, but I mean, almost every Final Fantasy game has chocobos. But I'm just saying, like, a lot of that stuff just made me think, this is Final Fantasy. And there's one thing in particular that I'm going to get in the spoiler thing where I'm like, where it just further solidified and just nailed that nail. And this was the final nail in the coffin. Where I was like, this is a Final Fantasy game. I don't care what anybody says. This is a Final Fantasy game.
Sure. What I'll say to answer Alex's question, you hit a lot of them well, Logan. You hit a lot of my points. I want to say emphasis on the icons is one of the big ones. That was one of the first things I said when I talked about this game on my original impressions was I love the emphasis they put on the icons, aka summons, the classic summon spells, Ifrit, Shiva, Bahamut, Ramu, all that stuff. That is like the centerpiece of the story here.
Yep.
And like Logan said, I was going to talk about the crystals and more specifically what Final Fantasy 16 refers to as the mother crystals, kind of these 6
Mm-hmm.
or 7 big boys that are, yeah. So anyway, I won't get into all that for spoiler reasons. But then
Yeah.
the other thing I'll say that hasn't been mentioned is I was thinking, especially more at first, I was thinking about how much they were letting us sort of letting us kind of off the leash and like letting us sort of explore. And I was thinking about the scope of it, and eventually you got to really kind of really wide open areas you can explore well. But I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking, I was like, how does this compare to the amount of exploration in like past Final Fantasy games? And what I was thinking of was like 7 and 9 and
Mm-hmm.
10 in that era. I'm like, really, this is like, it seems like it's limited, but it's really the same level of exploration
Mm-hmm.
as those old school maps that you'd go into, Nibelheim or whatever in Final Fantasy VII, or just whatever random town. And you got these random maps that you go in the town, and then that's the scope of where you can explore in that area. And it's really similar here in Final Fantasy 16. They give you, here's a town with some attached areas, and there's lots to kind of dig around in here, but not a whole lot. It's very well scoped. And I thought this really is a modern take on sort of the way that you would kind of get around and poke around and, oh, let me go around this corner, I'll find a tent, or I'll
Yeah.
find a phoenix down in the treasure chest and things like that. So I thought that was all appropriately, as far as like the way that you go about exploring and the way that they kind of drip feed it out to you, I thought was very much like classic Final Fantasy games that I loved kind of growing up playing. That's kind of a random thought, Alex, to answer the question, but everything really, Logan hit all the points that I wanted to hit. The only reason it doesn't feel like a Final Fantasy game is the lack of RPG elements and the fact that it's
Mm-hmm.
action combat. That's
Yeah.
literally the only thing I would say that doesn't make it a Final Fantasy game. Everything
Mm-hmm.
else is there, is present,
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's kind of funny, Alex. You mentioned what is it? Final Fantasy Origins Stranger of Paradise, and you're right. In that game is more of an RPG than this game is in several ways, and it's kind of weird to think about that, because then you would think, well, wait a minute, shouldn't that be considered? But I mean, as far as I understand, Stranger of Paradise is like actual, like in the mainline Final Fantasy canon, because it takes place before the first game and it leads into
Yeah.
all that, which I won't get into for spoiler, because I mean, I don't want Pixel Remasters. I don't want to spoil any of that stuff.
Spoiler, you have to kill Chaos.
Chaos. Dude, I don't care what anybody says. That game is great for the memes alone, dude. It's
Yep.
so chaos. It's so good. But yeah, so Alex, hopefully that answers your question. Hopefully that kind of clears the air a little bit. And let me kind of bring this down here, and I'll kind of end my spoiler-free review, and we'll get into John's right in here too about the changes of the formula that we kind of mentioned. So overall, my thoughts on the game, it's fine. It's typical Final Fantasy fare, where you go into a new entry, they change things up, and it's either good or bad. It just depends on your taste. For me, I wasn't really feeling it for a lot of it. There were certain things I really enjoyed. The icon battles are awesome. Easily my favorite part of the game. I love Clive as a character. I think he's honestly, I think he's one of the best Final Fantasy characters we have in the entire series, in my opinion. But there's just some things, I wish I got more time with the characters. And to be honest, I think I probably ought to do another playthrough where I try to like do as much of the extra side stuff I can, try to be around these characters and see if maybe I missed some stuff, because I feel like I might have, that might change my mind. That being said, also love Jill. Thought Jill was awesome, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. But
that's fine.
But yeah, so that's where I'll end it. Really cool stuff. Also, I just loved riding around on the Chocobo. It was so much fun. Oh my gosh.
I love when you can, you're on just, a random, open world map kind of area, and you just jump off of a ledge and just fly or glide for as long as you can on that fat Chocobo. Ambrosia.
I don't know why, but it was so satisfying to do that every time. That never got old for me.
Yeah. And she's just trying to fly, like not really.
I was like, dang, you're such a cute little Chocobo. But I mean, one of the big things with this game, and one of the big controversial things with this game, is the massive shift in the formula. And really, Final Fantasy has been kind of getting away from turn-based combat for a little while now, with 15 being the biggest departure. And now we're getting into this where it's really just kind of leaned into that pretty heavily, and it's more Devil May Cry-ish, which, I mean, I think one of the lead directors of Devil May Cry worked on this game and worked with the combat.
Correct.
And so John Hannon writes in and says, it seems like Final Fantasy has been veering more towards the action RPG genre for a little bit now. Would you prefer to go back to the more classic turn-based style, or do you think that more RPG depth wrapped around the current combat paradigm would be preferable? I've got my thoughts, but Michael, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I like that he used paradigm. Shout out Final Fantasy 13 combat system. Uh, uh, no, I want a mixture of both going forward. I think there's a world that exists where you can have, just for example, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. That's going to be the same kind of action combat that was in 7 Remake. So we'll have that one coming up next. But then say Final Fantasy 17. Let's go back to something turn-based maybe, or something
Okay.
akin to turn-based at least,
Mhm.
not a full-on action combat. Maybe something kind of like, which one was it? Ni no Kuni 1 or 2, where you can like kind of run around, but
Mhm.
there's still kind of some turn-based stuff going on. Maybe that
Mhm.
invokes too much of Final Fantasy 12, which people
Mm.
didn't really love. I
Yeah.
don't know, but you know what? Make it even make it something like Sea of Stars. I know that would never really go like
Mm.
no one would ever go for that, like Squaresoft, like the board and like
Right.
leaders would never
Yeah.
go for that. But like
Yeah.
make just a straight up like Final Fantasy 17, and it's a sprite based JRPG that looks like
Yeah.
something from the SNES. Like how
Yeah.
cool would that be?
That would be
You
a cool
know.
throwback. Yeah.
So I want a mixture of both personally, because I don't want every game going forward to feel every Final Fantasy game going forward to feel like God of War.
Mhm.
I wanted to feel like a Final Fantasy, so I would like a
Yeah.
mixture going
Yeah.
forward.
I think for me, I mean, you mentioned Final Fantasy VII there. I think Final Fantasy VII is the perfect blend of action combat and RPG mechanics. I feel like they struck a really good balance in that, and it just, I don't know, it feels really good to play. And
Mhm.
personally, I think going forward, I would love to see that or a return of the ATB system, the active time battle.
Okay,
I think,
yeah.
just from the OG 7, even 8, I think 9 had the ATB system too. And
Mhm.
I don't know, I really like that system. There was something cool about it. There's a level of tension to it where like you had to make your decisions a little quickly. You had to kind of hurry up, but there was still some strategy involved, but you could still be afford to just spam the attack button and be all right for at least when you're in the outer world stuff. Now when you get into the boss fights, you got to be more strategic there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would like that, and especially playing through the Trails games here recently, I really like the turn order where on the left side of the screen you'll see like what order your characters are going to go and the enemies are going to go, and you can kind of plan and try to delay them and mess things up there. You get little bonuses. I think that would be similar to an ATB system. So yeah, I think I would prefer. I mean, I really like the action combat in this game. It was really stinking good. It was so good. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, I'd probably prefer going back to more of an ATB system,
Yeah,
personally.
that would be
But
cool. I would like that as well.
yeah, but that's just me. So, with that being said, this is your opportunity to duck out of the show if you've not finished the game, because we're going to go into the spoiler zone here, getting real deep into a lot of things, the themes of the game, characters, literally everything. And so this is your opportunity. I've said enough. If you're still listening, you either have played the game or you don't care about spoilers. Regardless, let's get into the spoiler zone for Final Fantasy 16. And Micah, there's a lot of directions that we can go with this, but I think what I'd like to do is start with Mandelbrot 86's write in and just go straight into the icons, and then we'll
Okay.
use that to kind of talk about some of the other characters, because the icons are directly connected to the characters.
Yeah.
So Mandelbrot 86 writes in and says, I need to buckle down and finish the game so I can listen. My question for the discussion is which I didn't really read this after I copied it and pasted it in here. My question for the discussion is, which icon did you find had the best abilities for your playstyle versus the worst? For me, Shiva's Cold Snap and Diamond Dust completely turned my game around, but Bahamut, I wanted to like it, but his feat is awful. And man, I gotta go with Mandelbrot on that one. I love Bahamut. He's one of my favorite summons in the Final Fantasy series, but I hated his utility in this game.
Yeah, let me go ahead and jump on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
I hated Bahamut. Well,
Yeah.
hate is a strong word, and I think the reason why is because it was both built up in the story, and it's my personal favorite, or one of my personal favorites. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of people's personal favorites,
Yeah.
and the abilities for Bahamut I thought were counter intuitive to the design of the combat, because
Yeah.
the design of the combat is fast and frenetic.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bahamut powers had you like stand there and shoot a beam for 10
Yeah.
seconds and
Yeah.
like really slowed down the action.
Yeah.
And I was highly disappointed with the Bahamut. I was so looking forward to getting that.
Mm-hmm.
So while I'll kick it back to you, that was the one that was that disappointed me the most.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here. As far as my favorite, man, it is a toss up between Garuda and the Titan powers. Special shout out to Shiva
Okay.
though. That Diamond Dust move is insanely
Yeah.
overpowered in some ways. But yeah, I found myself using the Garuda moves a lot, and not just because I had that ring on that would allow me to just map all the complex combos of the square button, but I just love the skill set, the flipping enemies in the air, doing the talons thing and just clawing at them, and doing the one where you dash backwards and you swing your leg around and it kicks them with a talon, to even summoning that giant tornado. Like, I just love the skill set, and the Titan just hits like a freaking freight train, man. It's just, words are hard. It's so much fun to use the Titan abilities, because it just, like, you feel like you are literally crushing your enemies with how hard all the moves hit, and
Yeah.
the shield deflect, so satisfying when you get that as like a parry sort of thing. Oh my gosh, man. So for me, it's hard to choose between those two because I really love them both so much. But those are easily my two favorites. I know I'm kind of cheating a little bit, but those are my favorite ones to
No,
use.
well, if you're cheating, then I'm definitely cheating, man.
Awesome.
I've got several. So, like, just starting with what I'll just call Ifrit / Phoenix, so the
Yeah.
fire based ones.
Yeah.
That rising uppercut,
Yeah.
it was kind of hard to turn that one off. And then I think it was called Ignition, where you just kind of ram forward and you
Yep.
can grab 2, 3, 4, 5,
Mhm.
maybe even 6 guys if you're lucky, and just and then like push them off, and they'll
Yeah.
all get big damage. That was like, besides boss battles, any like, standard fight with 3+ enemies,
Yeah.
that's like the first thing I do. Like, I whip
Yeah.
out both of those attacks. So I love both of those. I'm with you, Logan. I love Titan. Once I got Titan, man, I was,
It's
dude,
so good.
that one where you got to like stop it right in the ring, and then he does the
Yep.
punch, and then lifts the ground up, and then like, it's the big one, the big area of effect
Yeah.
one that just sends people rippling backwards.
Yeah.
Loved Titan. But the one I think I used the most, that once I got it, I never took it off, was Ramu.
Yeah.
They're
That's
kind
another
of
good one.
basic attacks, but the area of effect is just so good.
Yeah.
Judgment Bolt is so OP,
Mhm.
kind of like Diamond Dust. So once you get it like mastered, like leveled up to master level,
Mhm.
which, by the way, and I think I mentioned this last time, did you realize that once you master a level, you can like use it for any other icon?
Mhm.
Like, you
Yep.
can put Diamond Dust on Ramu.
Yep.
And
Yep.
okay, just making sure
I
you
did
knew
notice
that.
that.
Okay, yeah.
I probably
So
should have utilized that more, but I didn't. But I did notice that.
okay, cool. So yeah, those are my 3 favorites. I'll say Phoenix / Ifrit,
Mm-hmm.
Titan, and Ramu, or Rama, whatever.
Yeah, whichever one. Yeah. But yeah, Mandelbrot, thank you for writing in. But yeah, dude, the icons are so central to the story of this game, and that kind of leads us into Clive's role in this game, because really, in this game, Clive is Mega Man. Man, he's absorbing the abilities of these different bearers, or dominants, as they're called in the game.
Yeah.
And using those abilities, you can swap them in and out in the menus, and choose which one fits your playstyle the most, or maybe even set it up to where maybe this loadout will fit this situation that you're going into.
Yeah.
But the story revolves around Clive, which is a bit of a shift in typical Final Fantasy fare, because normally you have a party, but this game clearly focuses in on Clive, and as you get further in the story, it brings other characters into the fold and it broadens out. But for the most part, we're focused on Clive. And man, his whole ordeal with being a dominant, really, just let me just say this. This game has easily one of the best openings to a game I've played in a long time. It hits when it needs to hit. It sucks you in with certain things, that by the time that you reach the end and you realize that the icon fight that you start with between Ifrit and Phoenix is Clive versus his brother, you're like, what the heck is happening? Did Clive just kill his brother? What? It leaves you just like,
You're unsure at that point.
Yeah, you're so flabbergasted by the time you start the game. You're like, I gotta play more, man. And this leads into Clive's character with how he's tortured, man. He's got a burden, but he's still very good natured. That leads him to rescuing Jill at the beginning of the game, running into Sid, which leads into the rest of the game. We can kind of go from there. But the big thing is these different kingdoms have what's called dominance, that are gifts from the crystals, or I guess when you read the lore, it's supposed to be a curse from God, so to speak, that they are burdened with this. And so kingdoms use these as like a last line of defense, a kind of heavy hitter to ensure that no one comes and messes with their kingdom. But then, if you die, then what is it? Is it like a 10-year gap before the next dominant is selected? I know there's like a time gap before the next one is selected.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, their kingdoms use them basically for like warfare advantages and things like that. And anyone, well, I guess anyone can use crystals to use magic, but bearers can just use magic straight up.
Yeah.
Without crystals, I think is how I understand it.
Yeah.
And so bearers are looked upon as lesser than. It's very much a class-based system, which again I think is very Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
And that whole kind of societal setup is the main thrust for a lot of the motivation in the story, and kind of the mistreatment of bearers, and kind of how, I mean, they're really they're used as slaves straight up, like it's slavery, and the mistreatment of them, and so on and so forth. So yeah, a lot to get into here. What's one thing, if I can go back just to that first icon battle between Phoenix and Ifrit, which if you played the demo, that was sort of the kind of the big ender, the big closer for the demo. And it's it's sort of like the game has a long prologue.
Yeah.
And this battle between Ifrit and Phoenix kind of is the end of it. But basically it reminded me, Logan, because you're doing this sort of flying around, almost like targeting, shooter kind of thing with Ifrit. You're playing as Phoenix fighting Ifrit. And it reminded me, Logan, of a Nier Automata.
Yeah.
At the beginning of that game, actually. Because I was like, what are we playing here?
Yeah.
Like, what is this? I thought this was a Final Fantasy. I thought this was, whatever. And you're doing all this crazy stuff. I'm like, man, this is the first time you realize, well, not the first time, but one of the first times you realize kind of what they're going for.
Yeah.
And truly the scope of these boss battles, and just how spectacular they are, and how over the top they are, and larger than life. So yeah, that was the first one. I mean, and it's really that battle too is the first kind of real taste of the score as well.
Oh,
so after that whole scene and you get done, it's just like, whoa, what a ride, man. That felt like a roller coaster. Yeah. Can we ride it again?
Yeah.
And that's what we keep talking about in the past episodes. That's that high, man. You're like, whoa, man, the dopamine everywhere. It's like, that's video games. And then you come down and you get into these just slower moments and stuff, which we've talked about ad nauseum, and the highs and lows of it. But yeah, that's the first icon battle that kicks it off, and it just kind of soars from there. So Logan, as sort of a transition and still talking about the icon battles, let me just ask you, what was your favorite one, or what was the icon fight that stuck out the most to you?
I'm so glad you brought this up, dude. It was the freaking fight with Bahamut. Oh my gosh. I was just like, I mean, you're fighting Bahamut and stuff on the ground and all that jazz. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. We're fighting. He's charging up. I'm like, man, this feels like I'm fighting like one of the strongest summons in Final Fantasy. It feels so good. But then when you go into freaking space, dude, I was like, hold up. Wait, what are we doing right now? We're fighting in space? This is so crazy. He's using Mega Flare. The flare keeps getting more powerful and more scary looking. You're combined with Joshua and you're flying. Dude, it is so insane. I love that boss fight.
You said it right there. You combine with Joshua. That's what makes it. And to kind of briefly set it up, again, if you're listening to this portion of the show, hopefully you've played it and But this is the first time in the story where Clive, he's been looking for Joshua, or the second icon of fire, and he just now realizes it's Joshua. And like Bahamut's about to like take out, I think it's like Annabelle, like everyone in this little spot, and then this is also right when Clive finally like he's accepted that he's Ifrit and he's finally getting control. And as soon as Bahamut does Mega Flare, it's like like a pillar of fire,
Yeah.
and he turns into Ifrit, and it's like, no, man, you're not taking my brother. And so it's like it starts off as an Ifrit fight, and then he goes down, and the Phoenix soars in. It's like, no, I'll help you too. And then he fights him for a little bit, and they're like, no, we gotta do it together. It's like.
It's so awesome. It is so stinking cool. Plus, like just the visual effects of it. I took a couple screenshots. Just the colors when everything's like blowing up against each other and everything's firing off. It is a sight to behold. In some ways, it's kind of like what a Girlfriend Reviews calls diarrhea Christmas lights at points. But it's cool, man. The music was killer. It got my adrenaline going. I was like, yeah, dude, this is so dope. I'm glad I kept playing to get to this because this is so worth it.
And you also said it too. He kept Bahamut kept going from like Mega Flare to Giga Flare to Zeta Flare and all those different levels of attacks that he has. It's oh man, I forgot about Zeta Flare too. That's right.
Dude, it's funny because the icon fights in this game remind me so much of a game called Azura's Wrath that is very similar in terms of just scope, epicness, a lot of just general anime explosiveness sort of things. And that's where I was like, man, I'm loving this game during these moments because I really loved Azura's Wrath. Really cool game that I think was probably a little underrated and not many people played. But man, I was like, dude, this is it on all cylinders right now. That Bahamut fight. But special shout out to the Titan fight too. That game, that was pretty wild. But Micah, what about you, man?
Yeah, no, it's Bahamut. That's the one when it's the culmination. I think I mentioned that's the one where Emily walked through and was like, "You at the end of the game?" Like, no, this is the middle of the game, I guess.
It feels like it. It feels like it.
Yeah, no, it's Bahamut, and it's that culmination of everything with the story and Clive realizing who Joshua is, and he's alive, and he's Phoenix, and they they take him on together, and then even like fuse, and that's the first time they like fuse together to become the one icon of fire. And so all of that, like you just went through, was great. The one that kind of it really was, they kept building on each other, almost like the Bahamut was almost kind of like that was the climax as far as boss fights goes. Like everything with Ultima stuff was also very, very epic. But anyway, what the one I'll say, this isn't my favorite, it's Bahamut, but the one I'm going to talk about now is when you fight Garuda for the first time and you prime up as Ifrit, and it's the first time you're like, whoa, this is a kaiju battle now.
Yeah.
And you have the huge Titan against huge Titan crashing at this larger than life proportions. Not that you didn't have that with like Ifrit and Phoenix before, but it's the first time they're like on the ground and we're like classic kaiju kind of battle. At least for me, that's the vibe I got. So the fight with Garuda is fantastic. I love the Titan fight. Also, they're all, every single one of them, in my opinion, are 10 out of 10. Every last one of them.
Yeah.
But the thing that I love at the end, it's not even when you fight Titan, it's when you're fighting Hugo Kupka. At the end, Clive straight cuts off his hands.
Yeah.
He's going for the big crunch. Yeah. He's like, nah, bro, your wrists are mine.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest, when he did that, and this is probably going to sound bad, I honestly started laughing because I'm like the game is obviously violent. That's one of the things about it. It's not like Mortal Kombat violent, but it's just like, it's very real. Like if Clive's going to cut you with your sword, blood's going to come out. You might lose a limb. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But man, when I saw that and he just didn't have hands anymore, I couldn't help but laugh because I was like, bro, that sucks. That's so graphic. Oh man.
It was great because of the way it was shot. It goes slow-mo and it's like sort of zoomed in on Hugo's face, and it's like you see his hands and all of a sudden his hands start going and turning in ways which they shouldn't, and he's like slowly realizing his hands been cut off. So I see why you laughed.
This probably sounds great coming from a podcast that claims that it's Christian. We're laughing at some dude's hands getting cut off, but I mean,
it was Hugo.
It's kind of fitting for that character because his whole thing is crushing and molding and destroying with his hands, and now without those, he can't do that anymore. And you see him struggling with that in later cutscenes where he has those like iron cast fist gauntlet things that can't move on.
Right.
He's trying to do things, and he just realized he's so powerless now. And it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. It's kind of fitting for how you take down or cripple an enemy that is causing so much pain. It's like, I'm not going to kill you, but I'm not going to let you keep doing what you're doing, you know? And
Oh
so,
man, you talking about feeling like powerless. How about when Clive took Benedicta Harmon's Garuda
mm,
powers? She
mm,
was like, and she tried to use them, and she was like, "What
yeah,
did you do? Give her
yeah,
back! Give her!" She was like
yeah,
freaking out,
yeah,
like she like she wasn't even a person anymore. So yeah, like it was fascinating to see the effect that power had on dominance, and you see
hmm
someone like Clive and Joshua and the way that they utilized it
hmm
versus someone like Hugo Kupka and Benedicta, who were just tools, and just they just sought the power, and that's all they wanted.
hmm
And that was like who they were. That
yeah,
was who. Like when Clive took that from Garuda, from Benedicta, she was like, "I'm nothing now. You just
yeah.
took who I was."
hmm
I thought that was kind of
And
interesting.
isn't that interesting, man? It's again, we like to pull thing or link things to theological themes or something here. You know, that they worship this power that they had or this gift that they had, to where it became like their identity, it became their power, their pride, so to speak. And when you remove that, it's like, what's left? You know, now that you don't have your quote unquote idol anymore, who are you? What are you going to
Hmm.
do? You know, and unfortunately, in a lot of these cases with these dominants, when you remove that from them, it drove them mad. And you see that with Benedicta. She loses it, changes into Garuda. Same thing with Hugo. He changes into Titan. Granted, Barnabas, I think it's Barnabas.
Yeah.
He just had full control over it, which is a real interesting thing that we can get into. But I mean, you see that with a lot of the characters. They become consumed by this power, this gift that they were supposed to be given. And Barnabas even mentioned, I think he calls it a gift, but everybody viewed it just in a different light. And when they just worshipped it, I mean, it just kind of led to their downfall, man. You know, pride comes
Hmm.
before a fall, and man, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And man, these characters get
Yeah.
real big.
Yeah, real quick, if I can touch on it, because that'd be really remiss if we didn't touch on this scene. While Bahamut is my favorite icon battle, I think one of my favorite individual scenes, it's just a movie cutscene, is when Odin shows up out over the ocean,
Mm,
and you had just gotten done building Mid's ship, the
yeah,
Enterprise, and you're
right.
out there trying to save Jill on Barnabas's ship. And long story short, Odin comes out. Phoenix comes out with Joshua turns into Phoenix, goes out to meet him, and Odin does his sword slash, like a vertical slash,
Dude,
and literally splits the ocean like the
dude.
stinking Red Sea. And it's
Yeah,
sort of like, if you didn't play the game, like both of the ships are like sort of like this, and the cut is right in between them, and so they both
hmm
sort of start falling
yeah,
into the vast abyss that just opened, that is like thousands of feet down. It
yeah,
seems like. And the way it was shot, and the one ship, like the bad guy ship, sort of like, oh, I'm gonna get out, no, I'm
yep,
my butt's falling in, and just sort of
yep,
slowly
yep,
sinks into, it's like, it's almost haunting. It's so
yeah,
well done. um but that was like, after that, this was toward the end of the game, and after I had witnessed all that other stuff, my jaw was on the floor, bro. I
yeah,
was like, what did he just do? I couldn't
yeah,
believe that.
yeah,
That was one of the coolest, just kind of whatever, like fantasy moments in fiction that I've
yeah.
seen, like I've witnessed with my eyeballs. Like, holy crap, that was cool.
Well, and that just goes to just how much I think they nailed the icons in this game. Is that they really, not only was their presence imposing, like there's a scene where you're going, I can't remember what the town is, but you're going through the town with who's one of your party members? Is it Gats? Is that his name?
Gav.
Gav,
Gav.
that's it. Like Clive turns around and Gav is just like, "What?" Oh, and you see Odin just up there with the sun kind of like shining down, so it's just a shadowy figure. So threatening, so terrifying. I jumped a little bit when I saw. I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, he's a big
It,
guy, man!"
it's a shout out to the cinematography for
Yes.
that sort of
Oh,
stuff.
dude, just the way they made the icon so imposing. And then you add in just their raw power when you see it on display. It's like, dude, they feel terrifying. I would be afraid to go up
Yeah.
against those. Thankfully, I've got, my own arsenal of abilities here to handle it. But man, they really nailed it.
They nailed the design, and maybe you said those exact words, but they nailed the design of every
Mhm.
single one of them. Like when
Yeah.
Sid turns into Rama, it's like,
Cool.
yes, man,
So
that's
good.
him. Like there's no
Yeah.
mistaking it.
Mhm.
That's Ramu.
Yeah.
Um, uh, all of them look great. Odin probably looks the best.
Yeah.
I love Odin.
Yeah.
He's sick.
Yeah.
And they made him really menacing in this game, and they made
Mhm.
him the final icon battle.
Yeah.
Even though technically, I don't think you fight Odin ever. I think you just fight Barnabas, which
Yeah, I
is
think
that
so.
correct? I think
Well,
that's right.
you fight Odin at parts, but like you're going back and forth between icons and just human
Yeah.
form, and so it's a mixture of both.
But either way, I wanted to bring up that one scene over the ocean because that absolutely blew my mind,
Mhm.
and I thought that was super cool.
Yeah.
The kind of in terms of boss fights, because I guess since we're still sort of on this topic and maybe
Mhm.
wrapping it up, Bahamut was like the climax though, and it was about 2/3 maybe through the game or something
Mhm.
like that, and
Mhm.
that really did the game a disservice. I thought the
Yeah.
game felt like it could have been over, and sort of did the same thing with Titan too. It felt like the game could have climaxed right there,
Mhm.
and it kind of felt over in some ways. And there's sort of like a 5 year gap, I think,
Yeah.
after the Titan fight, and then Bahamut felt like another climax. But then when you went to Barnabas, and then ultimately got to Ultima, it felt less. I don't know, like the stakes weren't really there. I mean, they
Mhm.
were, but like it's just like, man, I feel like we keep kind of coming up to the climax, and it's like, all right, well,
Yeah.
when are we doing it? When are we finishing it? And
Yeah.
so I felt a little less excited about the final kind of battles with Ultima and Barnabas and stuff.
Yeah, and that's one of the other issues with the game, how you kind of are on this roller coaster throughout the entire game, where the I'm gonna say goalpost, the goalpost of like what you're trying to get towards, it keeps shifting at different points, and it's a little not jarring, but kind of wonky in my opinion. Because like you said, there's several parts where
Hmm.
it could have climaxed. Really, the game probably could have ended it there. Maybe we could have done like a DLC or something. But they've said they don't really want to do DLC. Although I think they're putting surveys out to do DLC for this game. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
But it's just it's kind of confusing and trying to follow really kind of where the story is going, and it kind of narrows it down when you start realizing like, oh, the main enemy is Ultima, and he's kind of been behind the scenes pulling the strings on everybody, sowing seeds of chaos here and there, sowing seeds of chaos here and there across Valencia, and really for a long time, and so
Hmm.
there's that, um, but yeah, and I guess with that being said, we could probably talk about
Sure.
Ultima and Clive and Joshua, because that's really, to me, that's what seemed like the three main characters. Once you get past Odin, it's like, oh, okay, this has really been a story about Clive, Joshua, and their battle against Ultima this entire time. Who Ultima is, I guess, like the god of
Yeah,
Valisthea.
so let me try to explain this because I
Yeah.
didn't fully grasp it the first time I played
Okay.
it. I was like, I think I kind of know what's going on here. So I watched a YouTube video to help me out, and I shoot, I'm forgetting it. I'm gonna text you, Logan, the source of the YouTube video so you can put it in the
Okay.
show notes or something.
Okay.
'Cause I hate not sourcing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, anyway, he was saying how basically so Ultima's race of beings were wiped out or whatever, and he's trying to revive them. And the
Mm-hmm.
way he needs to do that is to cast this spell in which he needs this perfect vessel. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what he's trying to make Clive into mythos. He keeps talking about mythos, and so
Mm-hmm.
as Clive gains the different icons from the mother crystals and stuff via dominance, like which he created, like he created humanity, he created the mother crystals even though like ether and crystals existed and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
um I think it was the blight was coming and like was like messing up their world, so basically he needed to like revive kind of his people, so he needed this perfect vessel mythos to cast this spell which would bring his people back.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing was like, well, he created the humanity and kind of just left them to be and didn't really care about what they did, and so they sort of figured things out on their own, and they developed free will and all this stuff. And then now you want to come back and collect what's yours, and it's like, well, no, we're kind of on our own now, thanks, we don't need you anymore, God who created us. That is what I understand. Kind
Okay.
of the whole kind of motivation of Ultima was to create this one vessel, Clive, through all the dominants powered into one, to be a qualified vessel to cast this spell, which would bring his people back.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and he was just kind of a cold god, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
who was uninterested. And humanity is like, no, you're so uninterested, you can just kind of take a hike and we'll take it from here. And that's kind
Yeah.
of the
There's
thrust
even
of Clive.
there's a line when Joshua and Clive are going to fight Ultima, and they straight up say like, "This isn't your world anymore; it's ours." And then it initiates one of the stages of the fight.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how I kind of understand the motivations there. Ultima, the whole thing to me rang like, it's like, oh, Final Fantasy needed to put something really Final Fantasy in
Mm-hmm.
here.
Yeah.
And it, to me, I would have loved it had they just left it with the dominance,
Yeah.
and like having, just for example, Barnabas being the big bad,
Mm-hmm.
and he's owed, and you got to get to him, and that's that. And like, having some cool motivations for him. But like, I didn't need Ultima at all
Yeah.
in this story.
Yeah.
Not one bit. As soon as I realized there was something like that in the story, I kind of went, man, we were doing so good
Yeah.
having this. Not, I'm going to say grounded, but like, I get that, like, there's magic and mother crystals and stuff, but like, just
Yeah.
a more kind of traditional Final Fantasy, like I was saying up front. And then you had this whole like Xehanort type characters. Like, oh, get out of here, man.
Maybe maybe that was the Kingdom Hearts team's influence on the story.
Maybe so. So I wasn't a fan of Ultima. I mean, it was all right, but ultimately, I think I think the game would have been served much better had you just stuck to the 8 dominance and
Yeah.
kind of done that.
I agree. I have a few things to say here regarding. Well, I have one thing to say about the dominance I don't want to forget. But yeah, as far as Ultima goes, like what I found interesting about that, and when I finally got to the end of the game, I was like, oh, this is a lot like other JRPGs I played, where your final battle is to break free of the chains of fate and to essentially take down God. And I'm like, this is yet another example of man's struggle against God in games. And I'm like, man, I feel like this theme is kind of getting tired at this point, to where I'm like you, man. I'm like, I didn't really need Ultima in this game. I would have been fine just fighting Barnabas and then it ending there and be like, all right, let's go gather around at the hideaway and drink and hang out and enjoy our lives now. And then maybe bring like Ultima in like later in a follow-up game or DLC pack or something like that. That could be like I don't know, an epilogue or side story or something. But yeah, and it's weird too, because again, this goes back to the game's issue of kind of like shifting the focus from time to time to where you're not really sure which direction you're going. And it doesn't really focus on Ultima a whole lot for you to, in my opinion, really care at all, or kind of be like, man, let's take this guy down. Because by the time I got to Ultima, I was like, all right, it's just another thing I got to go take down. Let's just get this over with. I will say this though, when you're going to fight him, there's a moment where, at least I think you're going to fight him, like you're riding up this elevator and you're fighting like these giant like knights or something like that on the way up. And it's in that moment there where I was like, this is Final Fantasy, because you're playing as Clive, you're having the music soar, you're having these camera angles that are going, you're fighting these things. And I'm like, dude, this is like ascending the final tower or whatever in a final dungeon or something. This is so Final Fantasy right now. Like, oh my gosh, man. The look of Clive on his face has the same look that reminds me of Cloud when he's going to fight Sephiroth, of Titus when he's going to fight Sin. I'm like, man, this is so Final Fantasy right now, and it's just so good. But yeah, ultimately, I didn't care about Ultima. You know what I did find myself caring about though?
What's that?
Clive and Joshua, man. Hot dang, their brotherhood was so sweet.
Oh yeah, let's kind of talk about the ending, because so in during the whole Ultima fight, Joshua dies.
Yeah.
And there's a really emotional
Mhm.
scene where Clive's kind of embracing him. And a quick shout out, this is a good opportunity. Shout out to, in my opinion, every single voice actor in this game.
Awesome job.
Every one of them. Kid you not. Like, I
Yeah.
can't think of a poor performance from a main character.
Yeah. They
I
were
just
all
can't.
awesome.
And Ben Starr is the fellow who did the English voice acting for Clive. Great performance.
Yeah.
You can feel the emotion in this scene. So, anyways, Joshua dies, and right before he gets a final sort of power. He already sort of had the Phoenix power, but he gets a
Hmm.
final power from Joshua. Then goes in to fight Ultima, and
Hmm.
that is kind of I can briefly touch on this when he's fighting Ultima, and all of the other characters like Jill and Sid. And all these people are like talking to him as he's fighting and like
Hmm.
giving him like, like the power of friendship kind of thing as he's
Yeah.
beating Ultima.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool and sappy. Uh,
Dude, I was thinking this entire time, like, dude, this is just like Dragon Ball Z, but at the same time, I don't care because this is actually kind of cool.
Yeah,
So
it actually
I'll
reminded me a little bit of Tears of the Kingdom too, about how that game ended. But anyway, I'll keep the
yeah,
spoilers away there because
yeah.
for another episode there. Um, but going back to Joshua and Clive, so he dies, and then you beat Ultima, and Clive's like, "All right, I'm gonna end it now. I'm
Hmm.
getting rid of this kind of main crystal thing. I'm like, which means no more dominance, no more
Yeah,
bearers, no more crystals, no more
yeah,
magic. We're setting the world neutral so we can live lives how we want to as
yeah.
humans." And I wrote it down. I'll make sure I found it here. At the end, Clive says, because I had to rewatch it, he says, "Even if it means the end of me," meaning he's going to do this thing. So he
Hmm.
knows he's going to sacrifice himself, and which is so sad because Jill, before Jill
Mm,
and Joshua and Dion go on the final mission, she's
yeah.
like, you protect yourself for me,
Hmm.
like you come back to me, and
Yeah.
so that's really sad. But then he says the last thing that comes out of and fans might have missed it. The last thing that comes out of Clive's mouth before he does the act is he says, "These are our terms." He says, these are our terms. And maybe I'm misinterpreting this, but I think he's saying, you can take me, but I want Joshua to live.
Hmm.
That's my thought. I don't know if that's true or
Hmm.
not,
Okay.
because the post-credits scene shows a far future in which magic is gone, and it's almost like an ancient it's almost like a legend
It's like a myth. Yeah.
to even think. And there's this book sitting in the house of a normal family, and it's simply called Final Fantasy by Joshua Rossfield.
Hmm.
And so that makes you think that somehow he made it out, or I don't know how that necessarily happened. That's open to interpretation.
Yeah.
So I thought either through that deal, that transaction, he allowed Joshua to come back, or
Mm.
at one point Clive put his hand, after he got the Phoenix power from Joshua, he put his hand back on Joshua on his broken chest and
Hmm.
healed it. And he might have used like the Phoenix down
Hmm.
on Joshua to bring him back to life right before everything went down. So I
Mm.
think it's one of those two things.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't know which, and
Yeah.
those could both be wrong.
Right.
But I'm curious about what you thought of the ending, as far as like, Clive on the beach and turning to stone and sacrificing himself, and then Joshua's alive. Like, what did you think of all that?
I was so confused.
Yeah,
Especially when I saw that book that said Final Fantasy, which I will say, I'm like, that's a cool touch because like this is like a whole story. It's a Final Fantasy. But then I saw Joshua Ross. I'm like, he died. How did he write? What was he writing this throughout the game and I missed it? Like I'm so confused right now. I do
yeah.
like those theories there. That clears up a lot of things for
And
me.
again, I don't know if they're true. There's just a couple of
Yeah.
thoughts after watching that one video, which, by the way, I got it down in the show notes here. Is the YouTube channel is called Gingy, Gingy.
Okay.
He just did like a Final Fantasy 16 story explained. It's about 30 something minutes.
Okay.
So check that out. It's a pretty good video and clean. So yeah, that just a couple of thoughts there. I just thought that was interesting. He says,
Yeah.
"These are our terms," and I was like, "What does that mean? Like, who are you talking to?"
Yeah.
And maybe there's I'm not thinking of something, and listeners, write in. I'm all ears for this. This is like complete prognostication area,
Yeah.
so I don't know. But I did, Clive definitely put his hand on Joshua's chest, and he looked
Mhm.
healed. So I thought maybe at the very least, maybe he just did like a Phoenix, use the Phoenix powers to revive him
Mhm.
back to life.
Yeah.
So maybe that was it. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was the only thing I sort of took away from it.
Yeah, man. People will have to write in about that there. But
Mhm.
man, I think because I was watching that final scene with the kids playing, and they're having fun. They're like, I'm Ifrit or I'm Bahamut, and doing all that. I'm like, that's real cute. It takes me back to my days as a kid. And I'm like, I'm Blade, you're Spider-Man. I'm gonna take you down with my sword.
Yeah.
Blade was one of my favorite Marvel characters growing up. But yeah, I kind of sat there and wondered, like, so I was kind of thinking of this too, even as you were talking, like, man, this might lend a little more credence to kind of like what I saw. Did Clive like kind of reshape the world to make it more in line with his terms, right? I don't know. I'll have to go watch that final scene again, but
Yeah, well, ultimately, he wanted Sid's dream to come about, which
right,
is like a world without these differences of bearers and dominance, and of
yeah,
course, so that's what Clive did. It was like magic, crystals, all of it.
yeah.
Like it never happened. Like
But,
gone.
but also in a way, and I was thinking about this, like it's essentially a world free from their god character, which is Ultima, right?
Right.
And
Hmm.
man, I'm just like, I don't know. Because again, I like to think about these things from this kind of perspective. I'm like, man, I don't know if a world without God is necessarily going to be peaceful like this. But granted, Ultima is a completely different being than the God we know from the Bible. And so, man, I'm just like, I don't know. What
Well,
kind of like do
yeah,
you think about that?
it's definitely not, it's definitely not, based in any sort of,
Yeah,
Christian
yeah,
principles. I don't think, because I mean, what Clive is fighting for is like sort of the ability to be these imperfect creatures, and to like
hmm
that's what makes us human, is to kind of lean on each other and rely on each other. Clive was like, that's what you didn't do, Ultimas. You thought you could do it all on your own,
hmm
and you ignored us. So we
hmm
said, no, we're going to take over. We're leaning on each other, arms locked, and this is what humanity is about. And at the end, Ultima's like, this is what you fought for, was to, you know, have hardships and to suffer and
hmm
to make wrong decisions and stuff. And he's like, yeah, that's what kind of being a human is about. And that's like, okay,
hmm
that's sort of a hollow, motivation there, I guess, from a Christian point of view,
hmm
to just fight for simply free will and the ability to mess
Yeah.
up and stuff. But from this perspective of this God, quote unquote, lowercase g, um, yeah, I mean, it's a fine kind of plot point for a story and kind of a fine way
hmm
to approach it. But as far as like, I mean, just because, God, creation, humanity, like there's no real correlation to, I would
Yeah.
think, sort of our Christian understanding of creation and the universe and stuff.
hmm
But it's a neat tale. It's a neat story, even
Yeah.
with all the Ultima stuff. And it's worth kind of, and again, I don't grasp it all even yet. So like it's a
Yeah.
good kind of mature. It's a lot. There's a lot there. There's just, I mean, there's like what 10 to 15 hours of cutscenes in this game. I mean, it's a
hmm
lot of
There's a lot of
content
them.
in
There's a
this
lot of
game.
them.
So there's a lot to digest, and I'm forgetting a lot in the middle that, there's just
hmm
setup and stuff. So I mean, another playthrough at some point would be worth it, I think. But yeah, there's no real Christian corollary or anything like
Yeah.
that here. The Clive and our heroes' motivations is to kind of just, is free will. That's like the ultimate motivation, is to
Yeah.
have that free will. And it was a nice, like a nice package with a bow on top kind of thing, because Clive was such a good guy throughout the
hmm
whole time, throughout the whole game. He was such a good guy, and he always did the right thing, oftentimes. And it was a nice, succinct story that was kind of, I don't know if there's going to be any DLC. Like they told the tale, and it was a nice
Yeah.
package overall. Um, I'm kind of rambling, Logan, but I wanted to make this point that I thought will kind of bring it back to the whole like ups and downs and side quest stuff, and maybe we can get into Porcho's right
hmm
in as far as the
hmm
side quest stuff goes. But our boy Kyle Bossman, Mr. Box of Chicken Nuggets himself.
I still love that video he did on Gotham Knights where he called that game a box of chicken nuggets. I'm like, dude, that is the perfect way to describe that game.
Yeah, well, shout out to one of his recent episodes of Delayed Input over on YouTube, which talks about Final Fantasy XVI, and he talks about this idea of the special boy in video games, and how Clive is a special boy. Kratos is a special boy. Mega Man is a special boy because you are like the chosen one with these powers that has to save the
Okay.
world or whatever the case. And he was saying is for Clive, he was almost too much of a special boy
Mm.
because he's like, I'm the fire icon of Ifrit, and I'm going to go kill Ultima. Oh, and so you want me to go get these soil samples for you? That's why it felt so like
Ah.
disconnected, is because he was saying like Clive is too much of a special boy to be
Yeah.
doing these
To be
things.
delivering food around the hideaway.
Yeah, so let's dig into to Porcho's right in,
Gosh,
because
dude,
the side quests, man, they're hit and miss, but they're mostly miss.
let's do it. Porcho writes in and says there are some terrible side quests, delivering food, for example. However, there were some gems that told a story and had meaningful morals to it. What was a side quest that stuck out to you? Playthings and more than words were two I liked. Porcho, thank you for the write-in, along with all those who have written into the show so far. Porcho, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't know. I don't have any of these names for the side quest memorized. I will say, though, that personally, there were two that I enjoyed. And those were probably the only ones I actually paid attention to because I skipped a lot of text on the other ones and then just didn't do any as I got closer to the end of the game.
Sure.
But I really like the one where you got your chocobo. Thought that was a really
Yes.
cute reunion. I was like, I love it when you get your chocobo. What's the name of that chocobo? Is it
Ambrosia.
Ambrosia? And like you see, it's got that scar on its eye from when it protected you at the beginning of the game. I'm like, best boy chocobo.
Yeah.
Welcome back. I'm glad you're alive. That was cool. And then I just proceeded to ride the chocobo. It was just whenever I could because I'm like, this is awesome. There was another one where people might forget this one and consider it a bad one. I thought it was hilarious, but you had to, and I believe it's Gav. He was trying to learn how to cook, or maybe it was someone else in the hideaway. You had to go collect like these scorpion stingers for a stew that he was going to make. And when you do that and you see what it looks like, it's like this purple, gross looking stew. You eat it, you're both gagging and getting sick. And the guy's like, actually, this has a really complex palate with a lot of the ingredients. I'm going to keep experimenting. And I laughed at that. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the name of that side quest was, but I was like, oh, thank goodness these side quests are getting a little bit better. And then I got a string of just really bad ones. I'm like, never mind.
Yeah.
So shout out to those two.
It would trick you where you get lulled in, like, oh, maybe we're going to have some good ones here. And then you would get a real stinker for sure.
Yeah.
Any of the ones with the plus sign generally were better side quests because they would have like, it would always be like, hey, this is going to introduce a new game mechanic, like riding Ambrosia around or whatever. So those are oftentimes very worth it. The one I think Porcho called out Playthings. I know what he's talking about. That's the one where, and you may have skipped through it, but basically, again, bearers are like used as slaves. So this one kind of common folk person lets his kids take the bearer out to like basically be used as a plaything, basically like this wild creature. Like she's making it play with this like wolf and it kills the bearer. And it was just like, oh, she was like, haha, that's fun, and Clive's like, what are you doing? Like these, people aren't playthings. Basically,
Yeah.
the point of it. Anyway, that was a good side quest that Porcho called out. I'll say any of the ones that involved like characters from the hideaway. So like when you run into August and he'd be like, hey, something's wrong with Blackthorn. He's really down and out. Let's go check on him. There was a series of quests, like 3 or 4 or 5, where you had to go check in on Blackthorn for one reason or another. And it's always like, man, I saw this beautiful way to do blacksmithing or, and it's like, and I need to figure it out. It's killing me that I can't figure it out. So those were fun. There was one about like the origin of Torgal. That was really great, where you learned about like kind of who he was and why he is the way he is. But yeah, a lot of those and sort of the ones where any of the quest lines where you're helping out like Quentin or Martha over at Martha's Rest, who are like guarding and keeping and protecting bearers, were fantastic. Any of the, I loved all that kind of stuff. And any of the bearer protecting side quests, I was kind of all about those.
Yeah.
So I had said last episode that the side quests get better toward the end of the game. That is true, but by and large, there's way too many misses in the catalog of side quests. If there's like 50 side quests, like 30 of them are bad.
Yeah.
Like
And
straight up.
that's the thing that frustrates me. I know someone had written it, I think over on the website or YouTube, about the side quests and saying, they do get better and all that stuff. But like my biggest issue is that out of the gate, they give you these just, I don't know if remedial is the right word, but just these boring
Oh yeah.
side quests that I get, it's at the start of the game. It is what it is. But that lasts for so long that they eventually set the expectation of these are not really worth doing. These are just filler. You don't need to do these. And by the
Yeah.
time when you decide to do one and you get a good one, you're like, did I just miss like 5 really good ones? Like, is the next
Right.
one's going
You
to be really
don't
good?
know.
It's
Yeah.
just, it's so clunky. And I wish they would have trimmed the fat out of that and just kept the really good ones and left those in there. And
Yeah,
then,
keep the 20 good ones out of that
yeah,
50. Yeah,
yeah.
100%. Because it did totally, it felt like filler. 100%.
Yeah, yeah. So, that being said, that you kind of mentioned the characters there with Torgal, and it got me thinking about Charon, and then it got me thinking about one of my favorite side characters. And I'm probably butchering his name or not even remembering it correctly, but the researcher guy, I think it's a Hippocrates or
Yeah,
something like that.
Harpocrates, aka Tomes, is what they
Yeah,
called him.
dude, first of all, cool character. Love that. But his utility in the game, oh my gosh, dude. You go talk to him after you do a couple different quests, you share that knowledge with him, he gains more knowledge, and then the encyclopedia of the game gets bigger. And I'm like, oh my gosh, dude. Now when I pull up the action wartime or whatever that thing is during cutscenes, like I can reference so many things. I'm like, I love this. I wish more JRPGs had this sort of
Yes,
thing.
every game with complex worlds like this needs this kind of
Yes.
system now. When you include Vivian in with Tomes, and kind
Yes.
of, she was always like, "All right, here's what's happened as far as like all the different factions and where people are
Mhm.
moving in from like war side of things, and here's the strategy of what we're thinking with Hugo Kupka right now, and all that." So when you combine those two, and you can consult them anytime you want to. Really great resource that helps you understand the world while not feeling like, hey, we need a way to let the player know and understand the world. It felt very natural and like just something that you wanted to go investigate in. I would
Yeah.
hang out with Tomes and be like, oh, well, let me see this. Okay. And it would, so like you'd say, let me look up Benedicta Harmon.
Yeah.
And then it would reference an event that she was part of. So you click on that event and you learn about it. And like, then it tells about this place. So you read about the place and
Mhm.
you could just go down this rabbit trail. And before you know it, you could be like 9, 10, 11 tabs in. And you're like, oh, let me back out of
Yeah.
all these things.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a really cool mechanic. I really appreciate that. I know some people probably look at that and go, man, if they had to include this and the story is so convoluted. It's just like, no, it's just, if
No.
you've ever really read a really good fantasy book, and I'm going to call out Brandon Sanderson again because he's my favorite. There's times where I'm like, I wish I had like an encyclopedia or a dictionary or something that I could use to keep track of a lot of the stuff that keeps coming up in the story, so I can remind myself, oh, this is what that is, because they mentioned that in chapter 4 or whatever.
Yeah.
So helpful.
And
Love that.
perfect example would be I would have not played for like some time, like some number of days, and I've been away from the game for a while, and I would come back and I'd be at like a cutscene or like I'm at a
Mhm.
movie and you just pause it like, okay, what's happening, and then it would tell you, you'd pause the
Yep.
cutscene and there'd be like 4 or 5 things you could pick from, like the 2 characters that are in the scene, the
Yep.
place you're at,
Yep.
and the event that's happening. It gives
Yeah.
you all that information. Like, okay, I know where I'm at now. I remember now where we're at in the game, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. Really love that. It's a similar thing to, like, I just love little tools that developers put in their games like this. I mean, Trails has one where it's like you can pull up a feed of all the character lines for the last like 50 or 100 things that have been spoken. I'm like, gosh, thank goodness this is here, because I totally spaced out when this character was talking. Don't remember what they were said. Same thing here. I loved that mechanic. That was really good. So helpful. And that actually is a good segue into kind of as we round out this discussion here with our favorite and least favorite parts of the game. That was one of my favorites, was just having that. Plus, I love the little like 16-bit character sprites that would show up there and during the save thing of every character. Like, oh man, I'm like, that's so cool.
Yes.
Give me a 16-bit version of this game, and I will play it and give it a go. I'm gonna say at this point, Micah, I knew this was gonna happen. Where
You like it a little bit more
the
now.
more we talk about the game, the more I'm like, you know what? This game really isn't that bad. Maybe I'll move it up to a 4 on GG. it's just it's the same thing that happened when I played Skyward Sword. It's like,
Sure.
maybe I should play this game a little bit one more time and kind of see what we
Okay.
got. But yeah, so least favorite parts. That was one of my favorite things, was just the lore stuff. I really got into that. I love the world building that it lent itself to. Obviously, the icon battles, oh my gosh, were so good. But Micah, was there anything that you kind of wanted to highlight as one of your other favorite things that maybe we didn't mention yet?
No, I think we've covered them all.
Fair enough.
Of course, the icon battles are easily number one, and I'll just say the combat in general, the way that they
Yeah.
use it for like your mid tier battles, your kind of mini bosses, and your full on icon battles is wonderful, and I just love it.
Yeah.
And then least favorite is just again, we've talked about it too. Toward the middle of the game, I'll say, when you get towards like Dalmekia and stuff, and you start getting into the side quests and sort of, man, it really slumps. It really slumps down with the momentum. And if it can, the game is at its best is when you're kind of at a combat, when you're doing combat, and you're moving the plot forward.
Yeah.
And digging into the characters. Less so when you're kind of exploring and doing side quests and stuff. But yeah, I really love the game. It's gonna kind of go down as one of my favorite. I think I said it at a past episode. It's one of my favorite recent Final Fantasies. I think it's my favorite one since like 7, which isn't even recent. Like it's one of my favorite Final Fantasies ever.
Yeah.
So yeah, really enjoyed the game, but it's got some flaws.
Yeah. I think I'll end it or end this part with my 2 least favorite things, and these are really probably things that I would change to the game. Obviously, I didn't really like the slow parts. You get those really high highs, and then the game just like kind of slams the brakes, and you're like, okay, here we are. We're coasting. I'm delivering food. We're talking to some people doing a thing I don't remember. I'm the special boy. I shouldn't be doing this. But so one of the things that I wish the game would have done was, instead of making Clive like Mega Man, where you absorb the abilities of the icons, those characters, and I guess this would make it a lot like Dragon Ball Z, where you fight and then you become friends. I wish those characters would have joined your party and helped you go against maybe Barnabas, and that could have revealed Ultima, and then you could have went against this big evil at the end. But now I think of that in the scope of like how the game's combat works, I don't think that really would have worked very well, or maybe it would have, I don't know, but I think that would have had to push it towards more of a classic JRPG ATB system or turn-based system if they did that. But I kind of wish they would have, and I thought that's where it was going to go after a while at first, but then I was like, oh no, Clive's just going to suck the abilities. I fight the dominants, take them down, and then they're dead. And man, that's kind of a bummer.
If it was like a slightly less serious tale, I could see something like that happening, where like, Hugo Kupka joins the party, and like Clive's always roasting him because he's got no hands and stuff.
Here, Kupka, catch. Oh, you can't.
I cut them off.
That's a bummer. With the tightest laugh. That's awesome. My other least favorite thing, dude, freaking it. This game was a little too raunchy for me in the sense of like the sexual and the nudity stuff. I'm like, I'm going to say this. When it comes to any shows, I don't like even just like guys and gals kissing, doing stuff. Like, this is awkward for me. Let's just skip past this. Miss me with that stuff. And here I'm just like, this is, it was even more weird when Ultima changed into Barnabas's mom and she was naked. I'm like, dude, this is weird. Like, Barnabas, dude.
Yeah, no. I will say the game didn't really earn its M rating. I don't like
it didn't earn its M rating.
No. I didn't mean it that way. No, like it misused it. It's like,
okay.
Like you added some F bombs and a couple of it's not like they didn't need to do any of that. Like the game could have been teen, like easily.
Yeah.
And like they could have removed the stuff you just mentioned, which would, by the way, there's no like real nudity or anything like that, but there is
very
some
clever cover-ups and positioning of things. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, it's just like they're trying to be kind of edgy and adult, and it's just like, it was such a little component to the whole game. It's like, okay, you got your F bombs and you got this, and it's like, is that why it's M?
Yeah.
Okay. Like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. That was a frustrating experience for me and other people that I've talked to, and makes it definitely a difficult recommend. But then again, the game is rated M for mature, so Don't let your kids play this one.
Although I guess cutting off of hands, that would maybe, with like blood flying everywhere, that probably would warrant the M rating as well.
Nah, that's totally fine. That's totally a T rating.
You can do that in teen games. They did that in Prototype, or no, Prototype's rated M. I don't know. Anyway,
yeah, Prototype is
I don't even know.
Anyway, yeah. So I mean, there's that, but I do want to end on a bit of a good note. I want to specifically highlight Clive yet again. Great character. The voice acting done by, oh man, what was that guy's name? I'm trying to pull it up here. Ben Starr. Phenomenal job. I've seen a few interviews with him where he talks about when he got the gig and he was just so nervous. Grateful, but nervous. And apparently he's like a pretty big Final Fantasy fan himself. He's played all of them. And he was just like, I really want to do this right. And man, I doubt Ben Starr's ever going to listen to this, but seriously, hats off to you. Clive was fantastic. Great character. Just, oh my gosh, dude. I still remember that scene when like Clive is accepting who he is and he's accepting Ifrit and all that stuff. And he fights like a shadow version of himself and it turns into Ifrit. And he just looks at it and he goes, "You're not Ifrit. I am." And he changes into Ifrit. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so epic, Clive. Come on.
Yeah. He does a great job. So many good. I'm going to also point out briefly Sid's voice actor. I don't know his name. Boy, just they crush the voice acting.
Can we also take a moment to appreciate just how dapper Sid looked in this game? He was not this gross, greasy engineer in this game. He was a
I learned from that YouTube video that he is from the country of Waloed, which is why he's so dapper. That is a more of a stylish country, I guess. Yeah, but anyway.
Good looking dude. Loved it. So glad this is who Sid was in this game and not the risque revealing engineer girl in Final Fantasy 15, man.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Sorry to bring that up to y'all, but that was the thing they did. That was the thing they did. But anyway, yeah, Final Fantasy 16. Micah, any other thoughts about this game, man?
No, I think we've especially when you count the last couple of episodes, including with this one, we've really chopped this one up to death. So I'm glad we finally were able to dig into this one spoiler style. This game really deserved that kind of episode.
Yeah.
And I guess final closing thoughts are, if you are a fan of action games, action combat, especially that melee action combat, you need to play this game, whether you're a Final Fantasy fan or not. If you're a fan of good story, good lore, good kind of cinematic production values, all that kind of stuff, you're going to want to play this game as well. It's got some spots, like we said, it's got some flaws, but it is a game worth experiencing. And I think you know who you are, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. My final thought on the game is shout out to just how accessible the game is. I mean, you can make it as easy or as difficult as you want. And even when it's difficult, it's still relatively easy. From, when you die, it refills your potions, to where you can put different items on to make the combat easy, where it auto dodges for you. It maps all the complex combos to the square button, which thank goodness that's what I did, because I'm like, I like Devil May Cry. I can never remember any of the combos that they give me or that I unlock, so I'm not going to mess with that here. Thank goodness I have this, because now it's just like playing the Batman Arkham games where I just spam the square button and go for it. Yeah. But yeah, really cool game. So that's Final Fantasy 16. Dear listeners, let us know your thoughts on the game, and especially on some of these topics that we've talked about, some of these different areas of the game that we've talked about. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below if you're on YouTube, or if you're listening to this on podcast feeds. Hit us up on Twitter, join our Discord, and all that jazz. But with that being said, that brings episode 248 to a close. Micah, we can't leave the show. We can't end the show without some recos, man. What are some things that the dear listeners ought to be checking out?
This is the last time I'm going to bring it up, dear listeners. I've said it multiple times in the past. I'm pretty sure at least one other time I've recommended this show, and this is the last time, because the Ahsoka Disney Plus show is starting August 3rd, and so this is your last chance to go back and watch the cartoon TV show Star Wars Rebels, because everything that's about to happen in Ahsoka ties directly into like Ahsoka is the sequel to Star Wars Rebels. And Star Wars Rebels, if you don't know, is a 4-season, I think 3 or 4 season animated series that just has some of the very best Star Wars fiction you're going to find. Dave Filoni is the maestro of this series. He's the maestro of all good things that are coming out of Star Wars right now, are coming from his brain. And do yourself a favor and watch Star Wars Rebels. You will thank me once you start watching Ahsoka, because that show is going to be awesome. I guarantee it.
And when does Ahsoka come out again?
August 23rd.
23rd. Okay, August 23rd. Yeah. I've seen trailers for it. I'm like, man, I want to watch it because, what little bit I know of Ahsoka, I'm like, she seems pretty cool.
Super cool character.
Wasn't she trained by Anakin before he went all bad?
She was trained by Anakin, and she's awesome. Her training wasn't finished. She's a character that Dave Filoni created.
That's awesome.
That's his baby. So yeah,
that is awesome. Dear listeners, I got 2 recos for you. The first one is, and really the Kickstarter for this will go live by the time this episode hits public feeds. Longtime listeners will be familiar with Revelation Games. They are a Christian-based video game development studio. We've had them on the show a few times to talk about their past projects that, despite the level of support, never really got off the ground and saw release. But this one game they are working on called As One We Survive, where a dad is going on a journey to save his sick daughter in a post-apocalyptic world. It is a survival type game. The Kickstarter for that will have gone live by the time this episode goes to public feeds. Definitely go over there, check it out, see what you think about it, and definitely consider supporting their endeavor, especially since they are a Christian-based studio. I'm going to try and get the developer. I'm going to try and get Jeff Simmons back on here. We've had him on the show before to talk about their previous games and have him talk about this one and kind of talk about their Kickstarter progress and stuff like that, and just get his thoughts behind the game to help you get a more behind the curtain look at the game as well. So definitely go check that out, see what you think of it, and go from there. My other reco is, y'all know, we here at TRG are big Resident Evil fans. We love some Resident Evil, and their CG movies are hit or miss depending on which one you watch and in your taste. But this new one that came out recently called Resident Evil Death Island brings Chris Redfield and his sister Claire, Jill Valentine, Leon S. Kennedy. Who was the girl from Resident Evil 0? I can't remember her name now. I just watched the movie the other night. Anyway, she
Rebecca? No, not
Rebecca Chambers. Yeah, no,
Rebecca. Okay,
yeah, she's in there, and I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anybody else. I think that's it. Anyway, brings them all to the island of Alcatraz, where things just go crazy. And I gotta say, if you're a Resident Evil fan, I think you're gonna enjoy it. It's definitely, again, those games are rated M for mature. Same thing with this movie. Zombies. But man, it's cool. The animation's really great. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but it was a good time. I enjoyed it. It's an hour and a half, so not that long. I was like, man, this is pretty good. Not bad for $15. I bought the movie because I wanted to support it. It was pretty cool. And the action scenes were, about what you would expect. I think this movie, if I'm understanding correctly, takes place after Resident Evil 6 because they allude or bring up events from Resident Evil 6. So, if you're one of the 5 people who played that, you'll understand what's going on. The rest of us, you can just kind of fill in the boxes on your own. But it's a good time. Shout out to my boy Leon Kennedy, just being the cool hero that he is. That being said, though, y'all, thank you for checking out this episode of the Reformed Gamers. As always, if you like what we do here, you can consider supporting the show over on patreon.com. Support as low as $1 a month goes a long way in helping us continue to keep the lights on, pay our hosting fees, pay for our just recording lobbies and all that jazz, and it helps us get the games and things of that nature that you can then watch on YouTube as well, which is another way that you can support the show, is going over to our YouTube channel, hitting the subscribe button, hitting the bell icon, and that way you never miss an upload or when I go live playing a game, whether that's Marvel Snap, Trails, one of those games. And then, you just, leave a comment, hit the like button, do all that stuff, give us all that watch time. And if you feel so inclined, because subscribing to the YouTube channel is free, if you feel so inclined, you can drop a little tip jar in the form of a super thanks or super comment on there as well, and that helps in that regard as well. You can always check out our website, thereformedgamers.com, for articles and more, as well as our past library of episodes. You can follow us on Twitter, join our Discord server, and all that jazz. With that being said, thank you again for listening to this episode, and until next time, be a dear, keep it locked here, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to TRG. This show is fully supported over on patreon.com by our dear listeners. The following are our supporters at the producer level or higher.
and we are thankful for their continued support that allows us to continue doing what we do here at TRG. Those people are Mr. Butts, David Matthews, Richard Marroquin, and Alan Z. Thank you again for your continued support over on patreon.com, where you can pledge your support to the show and get early uncut access to all of our episodes, behind the scenes, and more. Thank you for listening, and until next time, be a deer, keep it locked here. We'll see you in the next episode.